The moment I walked into Romano's that evening, I knew something was wrong. My husband Marcus sat at our usual corner table, but he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman I'd never seen before, blonde, perfectly made up, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly salary as a part-time security guard. I should have turned around right then. Should have trusted the ice-cold feeling in my stomach. But I didn't. I walked over with a smile, believing Marcus when he'd said this was just a business dinner with colleagues. Elena. Marcus jumped up, his face flushed. You're early. The blonde woman looked me up and down with barely hidden disgust. Her eyes lingered on my simple black dress, the one I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. Then she laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the restaurant's gentle murmur. This is your wife? She said to Marcus, not bothering to lower her voice. The one you've been complaining about? My heart stopped. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood there frozen, watching my husband's face for some sign that he would defend me. That he would tell this woman she was wrong. He didn't. Instead, Marcus looked away, his jaw tight with embarrassment. Not embarrassment for her behavior, but embarrassment of me. Sit down, Elena, he muttered, pulling out a chair. I remained standing. Around us, other diners had started to notice the tension. The woman, I later learned her name was Victoria, seemed to enjoy the attention. You know what your problem is? Victoria continued, leaning back in her chair like she owned the place. You're a nobody. Always have been, always will be. Marcus told me how you dragged him down, how your little soldier dreams never amounted to anything. The room spun around me. Soldier dreams. He told her about my military service, about how I'd left the army to support his business. He told her and she was using it against me. Victoria, that's enough, Marcus finally said, but his voice lacked any real conviction. Is it though? She picked up her wine glass, swirling the red liquid like she had all the time in the world. I mean, look at her. What has she ever accomplished? She couldn't even make it past sergeant. Now she works security at some mall, living off your success. I found my voice then, though it came out smaller than I wanted. I left the army to help Marcus build his company. Victoria's laugh grew louder. Oh honey, that's what he told you? That he needed your help? He was just being nice. He felt sorry for you. The restaurant felt like it was closing in on me. Other patrons were openly staring now, some with pity, others with curiosity. I caught a waitress whispering to another server, both of them looking in our direction. Marcus, I said quietly. Is this true? My husband, the man I'd loved for 8 years, the man I'd sacrificed my military career for, couldn't meet my eyes. Elena, it's complicated, he started. No, it's not, Victoria interrupted. It's actually very simple. Marcus and I are together now. We have been for 2 years. You were supposed to figure it out by now and make this easy for everyone. 2 years. 2 years they'd been carrying on behind my back while I worked double shifts to help pay our mortgage. 2 years while I cooked his favorite meals and asked about his day and believed we were building a life together. The thing is, Victoria continued, clearly enjoying herself, Marcus was too nice to just tell you. He kept hoping you'd get the hint. But you're not very bright, are you? Still clinging to your little nobody life, thinking you matter. I looked around the restaurant one more time. At the faces staring at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. At Marcus, who sat there saying nothing while this woman destroyed me in public. At Victoria, who smiled like she'd just won a prize. Something inside me broke. But not in the way they expected. I straightened my shoulders, the same way I'd been taught in basic training all those years ago. The same way I'd stood when facing down challenges they couldn't even imagine. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice growing stronger. I am a soldier. Or I was before I gave it up for him. I looked directly at Marcus. Before I chose love over duty. Victoria rolled her eyes. Oh, please spare us the dramatic. I was good at it too, I continued, talking over her. Really good. But I walked away because I thought what we had was worth more than any career. Well, you were wrong, Victoria said with a shrug. I nodded slowly. Yes, I was. I pulled my wedding ring off my finger. The simple gold band Marcus had given me when we were young and broke and believed in forever. I set it on the table next to his water glass. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Then I walked out of Romano's with my head held high, even though I was dying inside. Even though the whispers followed me to the door. Even though my entire world had just collapsed in front of an audience of strangers. But as I reached my car, as I sat in the driver's seat with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I made myself a promise. The woman who'd just been humiliated in that restaurant, she was gone. The nobody Victoria had mocked, she was done. It It was time to remember who Elena Washington really was. I drove home on autopilot, my mind still reeling from what had happened at the restaurant. The familiar streets of our neighborhood looked different somehow, like I was seeing them through new eyes. Every turn reminded me of plans Marcus and I had made. The house we'd wanted to buy on Oak Street, the park where we talked about bringing our future children. All lies. All of it built on lies. I pulled into our driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the small ranch house we called home for 5 years. The yellow paint was peeling near the front door, something Marcus had promised to fix last spring. Now I wondered if he'd been too busy with Victoria to care about home repairs. The house felt different when I walked inside. Colder. Like it already knew it wasn't really mine anymore. I went straight to our bedroom, my heart pounding. If Victoria was right about them being together for 2 years, there had to be evidence. Signs I'd been too trusting or too stupid to see. It didn't take long to find. In Marcus's sock drawer, underneath his old college t-shirts, I found a jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside was a silver necklace with a heart pendant. Definitely not something he'd bought for me. My taste ran more toward simple pieces and Marcus knew it. There was a card tucked under the jewelry. For my beautiful V. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. V for Victoria. My hands trembled as I read the card again. The date was from 6 months ago. 6 months ago when I'd been working extra shifts to help pay for Marcus's business trip to Chicago. The same trip where he'd supposedly landed his biggest client. I kept searching, driven by a need to know the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. His laptop was open on the dresser. I'd never checked it before, we'd trusted each other completely or so I'd thought. His email was still logged in, and I could see months of messages between him and Victoria. Lunch dates, weekend trips when he told me he was working, photos that made my stomach turn. But it was the text messages on his phone that really broke me. Can't wait until the divorce is final. Elena won't fight it, she's too weak. She actually thinks I needed her help with the business. So pathetic. Don't worry, baby, once she's gone we can stop pretending. I sank onto the bed, clutching the phone. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long-term plan to get rid of me. They'd been laughing about me, plotting my exit from Marcus's life like I was some kind of problem to be solved. I thought about all the times Marcus had seemed distant lately. All the late nights at work, the business trips, the way he'd stopped asking about my day or telling me about his. I'd blamed myself, wondered if I was boring him, tried harder to be the wife he wanted. Meanwhile, he'd been planning to throw away 8 years like they meant nothing. I walked through the house, seeing everything differently now. The couch we'd picked out together. The kitchen table where we'd eaten breakfast every morning for 5 years. The photos on the mantel showing our life together, camping trips, family gatherings, our wedding day when we both believed in forever. In my old military footlocker in the hall closet, I found my service records and medals. My honorable discharge papers. Letters of recommendation from my commanding officers. Evidence of a woman I used to be before I'd convinced myself that being Marcus's wife was enough. I'd been good at my job in the army. Really good. I'd led teams, solved problems, earned respect from people who didn't give it easily. I'd been somebody. But I'd walked away from all of it because Marcus said he needed me. Because he'd convinced me that his dreams were more important than mine. That supporting him was the same as achieving something myself. Now I knew the truth. He never needed me. He'd just been too comfortable to let me go until he found someone better. I packed my important documents into a single suitcase. My military records, my college diploma, my birth certificate, and the small savings account I'd kept separate from our joint finances. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The rest could stay. The furniture, the photos, the life we'd built together. None of it had been real anyway. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to a note that said simply, "I'm done." Then I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I spent that night in a cheap motel outside town, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Marcus's needs or his schedule or his business problems. I only had to think about me. It was terrifying. And liberating. By morning I'd made a decision. I pulled out my old military contacts and started making phone calls. It was time to find out if Elena Washington still had what it took to be somebody. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I stayed in the motel, living out of my single suitcase while I figured out my next move. Marcus tried calling twice, but I didn't answer. Whatever he had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. My first call was to Sergeant Major Rodriguez, my old mentor from Fort Bragg. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, but he answered on the second ring like no time had passed at all. "Elena Washington," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I was wondering when you'd come to your senses. Rodriguez, I need advice, I said, cutting straight to the point. About time. You were wasted on civilian life, soldier. What's the situation? I told him everything, the affair, the humiliation, the divorce that was apparently already being planned without my input. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, making small sounds of understanding. So you're ready to come home, he said when I finished. Is that even possible? It's been 3 years. For someone with your record? Elena, you were one of the best team leaders I ever worked with. Smart, tough, natural leadership ability. The Army needs people like you. Rodriguez explained that while I couldn't just waltz back into my old position, there were options. Contract work, consulting positions, even paths back to active duty if I was interested. There's actually something perfect opening up, he said. Private security firm, works closely with military operations. They're looking for someone with your background to head up their new division. The pay is 3 times what you were making as a sergeant. 3 times my Army salary. More than Marcus had ever made with his struggling business. What's the catch? No catch. Just good work for good people. But Elena, it's not going to be easy. You've been out for 3 years. You'll have to prove yourself all over again. I thought about Victoria's words at the restaurant. About Marcus sitting there saying nothing while she called me a nobody. About the text messages plotting my removal from their lives. I'm ready, I said. Rodriguez gave me the contact information and wished me luck. After we hung up, I called the company, Blackstone Security Solutions. The woman who answered put me through to the director immediately. Ms. Washington, the director said. Rodriguez speaks very highly of you. When can you come in for an interview? Tomorrow? He laughed. I like your eagerness. But the position is based out of Atlanta. Can you relocate? Atlanta. A new city, a fresh start hundreds of miles away from Marcus and Victoria and the wreckage of my old life. Yes, sir. I can relocate immediately. Excellent. We'll conduct the interview by video call tomorrow, and if things go well, we'll fly you down for final interviews next week. That night, I finally called my sister Carmen in Detroit. I'd been putting it off, not ready to explain what had happened. But Carmen had always been able to read me even over the phone. Elena? You sound different. What's wrong? I told her everything. Carmen listened, occasionally making angry sounds at the right moments. I never liked him, she said when I finished. Always thought he was too weak for you. You never said anything. You were happy. Or I thought you were. But Elena, you gave up too much for that man. You were somebody before him. A real somebody. Not some wife propping up a man who couldn't appreciate what he had. Carmen's words hit differently than Victoria's had. Where Victoria had used my military service to hurt me, Carmen reminded me it was something to be proud of. So what's the plan? Carmen asked. Job interview tomorrow. If I get it, I'm moving to Atlanta. Good. It's about time you remembered who you are. The video interview went better than I'd hoped. The director, a former Marine named Colonel Stevens, asked tough questions about my military experience, my leadership style, my ability to handle pressure. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, confident, capable, ready for whatever challenge came next. Ms. Washington, Stevens said at the end of the call, I'm going to be straight with you. This job will be demanding. Long hours, high-stress situations, constant travel. Are you prepared for that? Sir, I've been working mall security and propping up someone else's dreams for 3 years. I'm more than ready for a real challenge. He smiled. Can you be in Atlanta Monday morning? Yes, sir. Then consider this your official job offer. Welcome to Blackstone. I hung up the phone and sat in that cheap motel room, staring at my reflection in the mirror across from the bed. For the first time since that horrible dinner at Romano's, I smiled. Elena Washington was back. I spent the weekend packing up the few belongings I wanted to keep and making arrangements to leave town. I closed the joint bank account Marcus and I had shared, taking only what I'd contributed. I didn't want his money, I wanted to earn my own. On Sunday night, I finally answered one of Marcus's calls. Elena, thank God, he said. Where are you? We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. Look, about the other night, Victoria was out of line. She shouldn't have said those things. But you let her. Silence on the other end. I'm filing for divorce, I continued. You can have the house, the furniture, all of it. I just want out. Elena, don't be dramatic. We can work this out. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being smart. For the first time in years. Where will you go? What will you do? Elena, you need me. I almost laughed. After everything, he still believed I was helpless without him. Actually, Marcus, I don't. I never did. I just forgot that for a while. I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow I would drive to Atlanta and start over. Tomorrow I would begin the process of becoming somebody again. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I slept peacefully. 3 years later, I stood in my corner office on the 32nd floor of Blackstone Tower, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. The view never got old, the city stretching out below me, full of possibilities and second chances. My assistant knocked on the door. General Washington? Your 3 o'clock is here. General Washington. It still gave me a thrill to hear those words. I'd worked my way up fast at Blackstone, faster than even Colonel Stevens had expected. Within 6 months, I was leading major operations. Within a year, I was running my own division. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted to Director of Strategic Operations and earned my private sector general's ranking. But it wasn't just about the title or the money, though both were nice. It was about remembering who I was underneath all those years of making myself smaller for Marcus. Send them in, please. The meeting was with a new client, a tech company that needed security for their overseas operations. It was exactly the kind of challenge I thrived on now. Complex, demanding, requiring the kind of strategic thinking I'd learned in the Army and refined at Blackstone. After the meeting, I had dinner with Carmen, who was visiting from Detroit. She'd been my biggest supporter through the divorce and my career rebuild. You look good, sis, she said as we sat at a rooftop restaurant downtown. Really good. Happy. I was happy. Maybe not in the same carefree way I'd been in my 20s, but in a deeper, more solid way. I'd proven to myself that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need anyone else to define my worth. So, Carmen said, eyeing me over her wine glass, any word from Marcus lately? I shook my head. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago. Marcus had tried to contact me a few times after that, but I'd made it clear I wasn't interested in staying in touch. Good, Carmen said. That man never deserved you. Through mutual friends back home, I'd heard that Marcus's business had struggled after I left. Turned out my financial contributions had been more important than he'd realized. Victoria had stuck around for about a year before moving on to someone with better prospects. I felt no satisfaction in his struggles, just a kind of distant sadness for the time we'd both wasted. My phone buzzed with a text message. Colonel Stevens, Elena, need to see you first thing tomorrow. Big opportunity coming up. I showed Carmen the message. Sounds important, she said. With Stevens, everything's important. But this could be good. The next morning, I was in Stevens' office at 7 sharp. He looked excited, which was unusual for him. Elena, how do you feel about going home? Home? Your hometown. We just got a contract with the military base there. They're hosting a major ceremony next month, honoring local veterans, bringing in officials from Washington. They need top-level security coordination. My hometown. Where Marcus lived. Where Victoria had humiliated me in that restaurant 3 years ago. I can handle it, I said. Stephen studied my face. He knew my history, I'd never hidden it from him. You sure? It might be complicated. Sir, I've handled operations in 3 countries and managed security for senators and generals. I think I can manage a hometown ceremony. He grinned. That's what I like to hear. This is a big one, Elena. The kind of assignment that gets noticed by important people in Washington. Do this right and who knows what doors might open. I left his office energized and slightly nervous. Going back meant facing my past, but it also meant showing everyone, including myself, how far I'd come. That evening I called Rodriguez to get his thoughts. It's perfect, he said when I explained the situation. Elena, you've built something real down there. Time to go home and show them what you're made of. What if I run into Marcus? What if you do? You're not the same woman who left 3 years ago. You're stronger now, more successful. You don't need his approval or anyone else's. Rodriguez was right. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding myself from the ground up. I'd earned respect, built a career, proven my worth to people who didn't give praise lightly. If I ran into Marcus or Victoria or anyone else from my old life, they'd see exactly what they'd lost. More importantly, I'd see it too. That night, I started planning my return home. Not as the broken woman who'd fled after being humiliated in a restaurant, but as General Elena Washington, successful, confident, and completely in charge of her own life. It was time to close the circle. The flight back to my hometown felt shorter than I remembered. As the plane descended, I could see the familiar landmarks below. The river that wound through downtown, the university campus where Marcus and I had met, the military base where the ceremony would take place. My stomach fluttered with nerves, but they were different from the anxiety I used to feel. This was the kind of nervous energy that came before a big operation, when success mattered and failure wasn't an option. I'd reserved a room at the Marriott downtown, the nicest hotel in town. It was a far cry from the cheap motel where I'd spent my last nights here 3 years ago. Everything about this trip would be different. My driver from the car service was waiting at baggage claim, holding a sign with my name. General Washington? Welcome home. Home. The word still felt strange. The city looked smaller than I remembered but also more vibrant. New buildings had gone up, old ones had been renovated. Change had come here too, just like it had come to me. I checked into my hotel and immediately got to work. The ceremony was in 5 days and I had security details to coordinate, personnel to brief and logistics to manage. This was what I was good at, taking complex situations and making them run smoothly. The military base commander, Colonel Martinez, met me at the base that afternoon. He was professional and clearly impressed with Blackstone's reputation. General Washington, we're honored to have someone of your caliber handling this operation, he said as we toured the ceremony site. Thank you, sir. I understand this is an important event. Very important. We're honoring local veterans and we have some distinguished guests coming in from Washington. The ceremony needs to be perfect. We spent 2 hours going over every detail, entrance and exit routes, seating arrangements, emergency protocols. It was complex work but exactly the kind I thrived on. That evening I had dinner alone at the hotel restaurant, reviewing my notes and making final preparations. I was completely absorbed in my work when I heard a familiar voice. Elena? Elena Washington. I looked up to see Mrs. Patterson, my old neighbor from the house Marcus and I had shared. She looked older but still had the same kind smile. Mrs. Patterson, I said, standing to greet her. How nice to see you. My goodness, look at you, she said, taking in my professional attire and confident posture. You look wonderful. Successful. Thank you. I'm doing well. I heard you moved to Atlanta. Are you back for good? Just for work? I'm coordinating security for the veterans ceremony at the base. Her eyes widened. You're in charge of that? How impressive. Marcus always said you were smart, but I don't think he understood just how smart. The mention of Marcus made my chest tighten slightly, but not with the old pain. Just a brief acknowledgement of the past. How is Marcus? I asked, more out of politeness than real curiosity. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew uncomfortable. He's managing. The business has had some troubles. And that woman he was with, Victoria? She left him about 2 years ago. He's been asking about you actually. Wondering if you were ever coming back. I nodded politely but didn't respond. Marcus's struggles weren't my concern anymore. Well, Mrs. Patterson said, clearly sensing I didn't want to discuss it, I'm so proud of you, dear. You always deserved better than the way things ended. After she left, I sat in the hotel restaurant finishing my meal and thinking about the conversation. 3 years ago, running into a neighbor would have sent me into a panic. I would have worried about what they thought, what they'd heard, what they might tell Marcus. Now I felt nothing but a kind of distant sympathy for the woman I used to be. The next few days flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. I coordinated with local police, briefed my security team, and worked with military personnel to ensure every detail was perfect. I threw myself into the work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of command and control. This was who I was now, General Washington, the woman who made things happen. On the morning of the ceremony, I was at the base at 5 a.m., doing final checks and coordinating with my team. Everything was running smoothly, exactly as planned. General, my second-in-command approached me around noon. We have the guest list for the VIP section. Thought you should review it. I took the list, scanning the names of local dignitaries, business leaders, and military officials who would be attending. My heart skipped when I saw 2 names near the bottom, Marcus Sullivan and Victoria Chen. Of course they would be here. Marcus had always tried to network with military officials for his business, and Victoria came from a prominent local family. They'd want to be seen at an important community event. For a moment, the old anxiety flickered. Then I straightened my shoulders and handed the list back to my assistant. Everything looks in order, I said calmly. If Marcus and Victoria wanted to attend the ceremony, that was their choice. But they would be attending as guests while I ran the show. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, they'd made me feel like a nobody in a restaurant full of strangers. Today, they'd be sitting in an audience while I commanded the respect of generals and senators. Let them come. I was ready. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright. I was up at 5, reviewing final security protocols and coordinating with my team. This was the kind of operation where everything had to be perfect, too many important people, too much at stake. My communication system crackled to life as my team checked in from their positions around the base. Everything was running smoothly just as I'd planned. Alpha team in position at the main gate. Bravo team securing the VIP entrance. All clear at the ceremony site. I felt the familiar calm that came with a well-executed operation. This was what I'd been born to do: lead, coordinate, ensure success when it mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Stevens. Heard great things from Martinez about your work up there. Make us proud today. I would. Not just for Blackstone but for myself. By 10 a.m. I was at the ceremony site doing final walkthroughs. The base had been transformed for the occasion. Flags flying, seating arranged in perfect rows, a stage set up for the speakers and honored guests. Colonel Martinez found me near the main podium. General Washington, I wanted to thank you personally. This is the smoothest operation we've ever run. Your attention to detail is impressive. Thank you, sir. It's my job to make sure everything goes perfectly. Well, you've succeeded. The advance team from Washington is very pleased. They mentioned that operations like this sometimes lead to bigger opportunities. Bigger opportunities. The kind that could take my career to levels I'd never imagined. Around 11, I noticed the first civilian guests arriving. Local business leaders, community officials, military families. I watched from my command position as they were processed through security and escorted to their seats. Then I saw them. Marcus looked older than I remembered, his hair thinner, his face showing the stress of the past few years. He wore a suit that had seen better days and kept checking his phone nervously. Victoria was with him, still beautiful but somehow diminished. Her designer dress couldn't hide the fact that she looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. They were processed through security like everyone else, shown to their seats in the general admission section. Not VIP, their status in the community had clearly declined since I'd left. I felt nothing watching them. No anger, no hurt, no satisfaction. They were just two more guests at an event I was running. My earpiece crackled. General, the Washington delegation has arrived. I turned my attention back to work. The real VIPs were here, the people who actually mattered. The Washington delegation was impressive. A Deputy Secretary of Defense, 2 generals, and a senator who served on the Armed Services Committee. These were people whose approval could change the trajectory of my career. I greeted them personally, escorting them to the VIP area and ensuring they had everything they needed. The Deputy Secretary, a sharp woman in her 50s named Sandra Hayes, seemed particularly impressed with the operation. This is excellent work, General Washington, she said as I briefed her on the ceremony schedule. Clean, efficient, professional. Exactly what we like to see. Thank you, ma'am. My team has worked hard to ensure everything runs smoothly. I can tell. You know, we have some upcoming operations that could use someone with your skills. Would you be interested in discussing them after the ceremony? My heart jumped. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Stevens had mentioned. Absolutely, ma'am. As the ceremony time approached, I took my position at the command center, overseeing every detail. The bass band played patriotic music as guests settled into their seats. The flags snapped in the breeze. Everything was perfect. Through my earpiece I heard the final countdown. 2 minutes to ceremony start. I looked out over the assembled crowd. Hundreds of people, including local dignitaries, military officials, and the Washington VIPs who could shape my future. At the back of the general seating area, I could see Marcus and Victoria, looking small and insignificant among the crowd. 1 minute to ceremony start. I felt completely calm, completely in control. This was my operation, my moment, my chance to show everyone, including myself, exactly who Elena Washington had become. Ceremony begins now. Colonel Martinez took the stage to welcome everyone and begin the program. I monitored everything from my position, ready to handle any situation that might arise. The ceremony moved through its scheduled phases. The presentation of colors, remarks from local officials, recognition of local veterans. Each segment flowed seamlessly into the next, exactly as planned. Then Colonel Martinez returned to the microphone for the special recognition portion of the program. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the honor of recognizing someone whose service to our country continues in new and important ways. Someone who exemplifies the best of military leadership, both in uniform and beyond. I watched from my command position, monitoring the crowd and maintaining security protocols. This was likely one of the Washington officials or perhaps a local veteran with a distinguished record. This individual left active duty to support family, but never stopped serving. After rebuilding their career in the private sector, they've returned home today to ensure this ceremony honors our veterans with the dignity and respect they deserve. Something in Martinez's tone made me look up from my security monitors. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce the security coordinator for today's ceremony, a leader who's earned respect at the highest levels of military and civilian operations, General Elena Washington. The crowd erupted in applause as all eyes turned toward me. The applause seemed to go on forever. I stood frozen at my command position, suddenly aware that hundreds of people were looking at me, clapping, some even standing. This wasn't part of the program I'd reviewed. Colonel Martinez gestured for me to join him on stage. My legs felt unsteady as I walked across the ceremony grounds, conscious of every step. Through the crowd I could see Marcus and Victoria, their faces pale with shock. But I focused on the VIP section, where Deputy Secretary Hayes was applauding with genuine enthusiasm. This was about my work, my achievements, not about settling old scores. I reached the stage and stood beside Colonel Martinez, my military training taking over. Stand straight, shoulders back, project confidence even when your heart is racing. General Washington has coordinated security operations in multiple countries, Martinez continued. She's worked with senators, generals, and heads of state. Today, she's brought that expertise home to ensure we can honor our local veterans properly. More applause. I caught sight of Mrs. Patterson in the crowd, beaming with pride. Several other neighbors and acquaintances were pointing me out to their companions, clearly impressed. Martinez handed me the microphone. Would you like to say a few words, General? I hadn't prepared for this, but years of military briefings and corporate presentations kicked in. I looked out over the crowd, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. Thank you, Colonel Martinez, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the ceremony grounds. When I left this community 3 years ago, I wasn't sure what my future held. But I knew I wanted to serve again in whatever way I could. I could see Marcus in the crowd now, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into her seat. The men and women we're honoring today understand service, I continued. They understand that sometimes we're called to do difficult things, to make sacrifices, to rebuild ourselves when life takes unexpected turns. The crowd was completely quiet now, hanging on every word. I'm honored to be part of today's ceremony, and I'm proud to serve alongside the outstanding military personnel at this base. Thank you. The applause was even louder this time. As I handed the microphone back to Martinez, I saw Deputy Secretary Hayes nod approvingly. This was good, very good for my career prospects. I returned to my command position as the ceremony continued, but something had shifted. People kept glancing in my direction, whispering to their neighbors. Word was spreading through the crowd about who I was, what I'd accomplished. Through my earpiece, my team checked in with updates, but everything was running smoothly. The ceremony proceeded through the recognition of local veterans, each story of service and sacrifice adding to the dignity of the event. During a brief intermission, several people approached my command area. Former colleagues from my Army days, old acquaintances from around town, even some people I didn't recognize who wanted to congratulate me on my success. Elena, I always knew you'd do something big, said Tom Morrison, who'd worked with Marcus years ago. You were too smart to stay stuck in that situation. I smiled politely but kept my responses professional. This wasn't about my personal life, it was about doing my job well. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus trying to make his way toward me through the crowd. I pretended not to notice, focusing intently on my security monitors. The ceremony resumed with remarks from the Washington delegation. Deputy Secretary Hayes spoke about the importance of supporting veterans and recognizing community leaders who continue to serve. Her words seemed directed partly at me. Excellence in service doesn't end when someone leaves active duty, she said. It continues in new forms, new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. After her remarks, there was a brief reception for VIP guests. I was invited to attend, which meant mingling with some of the most important military and political figures in the country. As I prepared to join the reception, my earpiece crackled one final time. General, all stations report ceremony complete. Outstanding work. I smiled, allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. Everything had gone perfectly. More than perfectly. Now came the real test, the reception where careers were made and opportunities were born. The VIP reception was held in the base's officer club, an elegant space I'd helped secure earlier in the week. As I entered, I was immediately approached by Deputy Secretary Hayes. General Washington, that was an outstanding operation, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I rarely see ceremonies run that smoothly. Thank you, ma'am. My team worked very hard to ensure everything went perfectly. I can tell. And that speech you gave, inspiring. You have a natural presence. We were joined by General Morrison, one of the military officials from Washington. Elena, I've been hearing impressive things about your work at Blackstone. Sandra's right, you have a gift for leadership. The conversation continued, with both officials expressing interest in my background and future plans. This was exactly the kind of networking that could transform a career. We should discuss some opportunities, Deputy Secretary Hayes said. There are positions opening up that require someone with your unique combination of military experience and private sector success. My heart raced. These were the opportunities Stevens had hinted at, the kind that could take me to the highest levels of government service. I'd be very interested in those discussions, ma'am. Excellent. I'll have my office reach out to set up a meeting. As they moved on to speak with other guests, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Commander James Chin, Victoria's husband. I recognized him from photos I'd seen around town years ago, though we'd never been formally introduced. General Washington, he said with a respectful nod. Commander Chin, I wanted to personally thank you for today's outstanding work. Chin, Victoria's married name. I kept my expression neutral, professional. Thank you, Commander. I'm glad everything met expectations. More than met them. You know, I've been following your career at Blackstone. Very impressive trajectory. He seemed genuine, professional. Whatever problems existed in his marriage, he was treating me with the respect due my position. I appreciate that, sir. Actually, I wanted to mention, my wife is here today. I believe you two may have met years ago? Victoria Chin? So he knew. The question was how much he knew. Yes, we've met, I said carefully. She mentioned she'd like to speak with you if you have a moment, to congratulate you on your success. I doubted that was exactly what Victoria wanted to discuss, but I was curious enough to agree. Of course. Commander Chen led me to a quieter corner of the reception where Victoria stood alone, looking nervous and uncomfortable. Up close, I could see the strain of the past few years had taken its toll. She was still attractive, but there was something brittle about her now. Victoria, Commander Chen said gently, this is General Washington. Victoria looked at me for a long moment, her face cycling through several emotions. Finally, she extended her hand. General Washington, she said quietly. Congratulations on your success. Her voice lacked the sharp confidence I remembered from that night at Romano's. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished. Thank you, I replied neutrally. Commander Chin excused himself to speak with other guests, leaving Victoria and me alone. The silence stretched between us. I owe you an apology, Victoria finally said. For that night at the restaurant. For the things I said. They were cruel and unnecessary. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But she seemed genuinely remorseful, even ashamed. I was trying to hurt you, she continued. I was threatened by you if I'm being honest. Marcus talked about you constantly, your intelligence, your capabilities, your potential. He said you were wasted as a security guard, that you could do anything you set your mind to. This was not what I'd expected to hear. He said you'd given up a promising military career for him and he felt guilty about it. He knew he was holding you back. Then why did he let you humiliate me that night? Victoria's shoulders sagged. Because I pushed him to choose. I told him he had to decide between his guilt over you and his future with me. I forced him to publicly reject you to prove his commitment. The admission hung in the air between us. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I thought I was winning, Victoria continued. But I was really just destroying 3 lives. Marcus was never the same after you left. He blamed himself, then blamed me. Our relationship fell apart within a year. I heard you left him. I did. I realized I'd won a man who couldn't respect himself for what he'd done. What kind of victory was that? Before I could respond, Commander Chin returned with Marcus in tow. My ex-husband looked even more uncomfortable than his wife, if that was possible. Elena, Marcus said quietly. You look incredible. Successful. Thank you. I heard about your promotion, your work. I always knew you were capable of great things. The irony was thick. 3 years ago, he'd sat silently while Victoria called me a nobody. Now he wanted to claim he'd always believed in me. Marcus, Commander Chin said, I believe you have something you wanted to say to General Washington. Marcus nodded, looking ashamed. Elena, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What I did, what I allowed to happen, it was unforgivable. You sacrificed your career for me, supported my dreams, and I repaid you with betrayal and public humiliation. He paused, struggling with the words. You were always the stronger one. The smarter one. I was intimidated by your potential, so I convinced myself you needed me. But you never did. You were just kind enough to pretend you did. I looked at this man I'd once loved, once trusted with my future. He seemed genuinely sorry, but his remorse couldn't undo the damage or restore the years I'd lost. I appreciate the apology, Marcus, I said finally. But that was all a lifetime ago. Is there any chance? He started. No, I said firmly but not unkindly. There isn't. Commander Chin nodded approvingly. General Washington, thank you for your graciousness. Both Marcus and Victoria needed to face what they'd done. As if summoned by his words, Deputy Secretary Hayes appeared at my elbow. General, I hate to interrupt, but we need to discuss those opportunities one mentioned. Are you free for a private conversation? Absolutely, ma'am. I turned back to Marcus and Victoria. I wish you both well. Truly. Then I walked away with Deputy Secretary Hayes, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. Deputy Secretary Hayes led me to a small conference room in the officer club where we could speak privately. General Morrison joined us, along with Colonel Martinez. Elena, Hayes began, what I'm about to discuss is confidential until you make a decision. I nodded, my pulse quickening. We're creating a new position in the Department of Defense, Director of Strategic Operations Coordination. It's a civilian role, but one that requires someone with both military experience and private sector success. General Morrison leaned forward. The position would involve coordinating complex operations between military and civilian agencies. Someone with your background at Blackstone, combined with your military service, would be perfect. The salary is substantial, Hayes continued, and the position comes with significant authority and responsibility. You'd be working directly with senior Pentagon officials and reporting to the Secretary of Defense. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was reeling. This was beyond anything I'd imagined when I left town 3 years ago as a broken, humiliated woman. There would be a confirmation process, Martinez added. Background checks, congressional hearings, the full process for a high-level appointment. I understand, I said. What's the timeline? We'd like to move quickly, Hayes replied. Assuming you're interested, we could begin the process immediately. You'd need to relocate to Washington, obviously. Washington, D.C. The center of American power, where decisions that shaped the world were made daily. I'm very interested, I said. Hayes smiled. I hoped you would be. Your work today confirmed what we'd heard about your capabilities. You have exactly the kind of leadership presence we need. We spent another hour discussing details, expectations, and next steps. By the time we finished, I felt like I was floating. As I left the conference room, I nearly collided with Commander Chin, who was waiting in the hallway. General Washington, he said. I wanted to speak with you privately, if I may. I followed him to a quiet corner of the officer club. I need to apologize for my wife's behavior 3 years ago, he began. I knew about the affair, knew about that night at the restaurant. I should have intervened. This was unexpected. You knew. Victoria told me eventually. She was proud of it at first, thought she'd won some kind of victory. It took her time to realize what she'd actually done. Chin looked genuinely pained by the admission. I want you to know that your reputation in military circles was never damaged by what happened. Those of us who knew you recognized your value. In fact, it made us angry that someone of your caliber had been treated so poorly. I appreciate that, Commander. There's something else, he said. The position Secretary Hayes offered you, I was one of the people who recommended you for it. I stared at him in surprise. Your work at Blackstone has been noticed at the highest levels of the Pentagon. When this position opened up, several of us immediately thought of you. What happened here today just confirmed that we were right. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. That means a great deal. You've earned every bit of success you've achieved, General. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As Chin walked away, I stood in the hallway processing everything that had happened. 3 years ago, I'd left this town as a nobody, at least in Victoria's words. Today, I was returning to Washington, D.C. as a senior Pentagon official. The reception was winding down. I made my rounds, thanking the military officials and saying goodbye to the Washington delegation. Several people asked for my contact information, wanting to stay in touch as my career progressed. As I prepared to leave, I spotted Marcus near the exit, clearly waiting for me. Against my better judgment, I approached him. Elena, he said. I heard about your new position. Congratulations. Thank you. I know I have no right to ask this, but I had to try. Is there any possibility we could talk? Maybe get coffee sometime? I know I can't undo what I did, but... Marcus, I interrupted gently. I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward. He nodded sadly. I understand. I just want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe, I said. But it wasn't a mistake for me. If none of this had happened, I'd still be working mall security and supporting someone else's dreams. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing. I left Marcus standing there and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. My driver was waiting to take me back to the hotel, where I would pack for my return to Atlanta and begin preparing for my move to Washington. As we drove through town, I looked out at the familiar streets one last time. This place had shaped me, broken me, and ultimately forged me into someone stronger. But it wasn't home anymore. Home was wherever my next challenge waited. 6 months later, I stood in my new office in the Pentagon, looking out at the Washington skyline. The confirmation process had been smooth. My military record and private sector success had impressed even the most skeptical senators. Director of Strategic Operations Coordination. The nameplate on my desk still gave me a thrill. My assistant knocked on the door. Director Washington? The secretary is ready for the briefing. I gathered my files and headed to the meeting. In a few minutes, I'd be briefing the Secretary of Defense on a classified operation that could affect national security. This was the kind of responsibility I'd dreamed of but never thought I'd achieve. The meeting went well. My recommendations were accepted, my strategic analysis praised. As I left the secretary's office, I felt the deep satisfaction that came from doing important work at the highest level. That evening, I had dinner with Carmen, who'd flown in from Detroit to celebrate my confirmation. I'm so proud of you, she said, raising her wine glass. From that horrible night at the restaurant to this, it's incredible. It feels incredible, I admitted. Like I'm finally living the life I was meant to live. Any regrets about not taking Marcus back? He's called me a few times, asking if I thought you'd ever change your mind. I shook my head. None at all. That version of me, the one who made herself smaller to make someone else comfortable, she's gone. I like who I am now. Carmen smiled. Good. You deserve someone who sees your worth from the beginning, not someone who only appreciates you after you've proven yourself to the world. After dinner, I returned to my apartment. A beautiful place in Georgetown that I could afford with my new salary. As I got ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Colonel Stevens from Blackstone. Elena, he said, I wanted to congratulate you again on the new position. You've made us all proud. Thank you, sir. Blackstone gave me the foundation I needed for this. Actually, I'm calling about something else. We just got a request from the Pentagon for security consultation on an overseas operation. They specifically asked for you to oversee it. I smiled. Even in my new government role, my reputation at Blackstone continued to open doors. I'd be honored to help as long as there's no conflict of interest. Already cleared it with your new bosses. They're impressed that we want to loan you back for special projects. After we hung up, I sat in my living room thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I'd been a broken woman fleeing a humiliating public betrayal. Tonight, I was a senior Pentagon official being sought out for my expertise. The woman Victoria had called a nobody was now somebody who mattered. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about your confirmation. Couldn't be happier for you. You always deserved better. Victoria. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Some chapters were meant to stay closed. Instead, I opened my laptop and began reviewing files for tomorrow's meetings. There was important work to be done, decisions that would affect operations around the world. As I worked, I thought about the young woman who joined the army years ago, full of dreams and determination. She'd been sidetracked for a while, convinced that love meant making herself smaller. But she'd found her way back. Stronger, smarter, more confident than ever. I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't getting even with people who'd wronged you. It was becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so completely yourself that their opinions became irrelevant. Marcus and Victoria had humiliated me in a restaurant, called me a nobody, planned my exit from their lives like I was an inconvenience to be managed. Now I was Director Elena Washington, trusted with national security decisions, respected by generals and senators, living a life of purpose and achievement. I'd won. Not by destroying them, but by building something so much better than what I'd lost. Outside my window, the lights of Washington, D.C. sparkled in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to make a difference. I was ready for all of it. The nobody had become somebody who truly mattered. And this was just the beginning.